Right now, there's an elephant standing in a field in Kenya doing something that has no practical explanation. She's standing over a pile of bones. Not her bones. Bones she found. She's touching them slowly with the tip of her trunk, running it across the skull, the ribs, the curved ivory. She's been there for 20 minutes. She didn't know this elephant. They never met. And yet, she won't leave. If you ask most people what she's doing, they'd say she doesn't understand what death is. She's just investigating something unusual. But what if that's wrong? What if behind those eyes there's something that understands, on some level, that this is what everything becomes? And what if the harder question isn't whether animals know death exists, but whether they know it's coming for them too? Let's start with the behavior that's hardest to explain away. Elephants have been returning to the bones of their dead for as long as researchers have been watching them, not to all bones, specifically to elephant bones. In a series of experiments conducted by Karen McComb at the University of Sussex, researchers presented wild elephants with 3 objects: a piece of ivory from a dead elephant, a piece of wood, and a piece of ivory from a living elephant. The elephant spent significantly more time investigating the ivory from the dead animal, touching it repeatedly, passing it between individuals, sometimes standing over it in silence for extended periods. They showed no comparable interest in the wood or the living ivory. They were not looking for food. They were not threatened. Something about elephant remains specifically held their attention in a way that nothing else did. McComb described it as a generalized response to elephant death. Not grief for a specific individual, but something broader. A recognition that what they were looking at represented something significant. But recognition of death in others is different from understanding that you yourself will die. That requires something philosophers call mortality salience, the awareness that your own existence is finite, that the thing that happened to the bones on the ground will eventually happen to you. For decades, scientists assumed this was exclusively human. Then the research started catching up with the assumption, and the assumptions started falling apart. In 2018, a study published in PLOS One documented the behavior of a group of chimpanzees in Zambia when a senior female named Noel died of a respiratory illness. Her adult son Thomas sat beside her body for hours after her death. He groomed her. He checked her breathing periodically, placing his fingers near her nose. He slept next to her overnight. He stayed for more than 12 hours after she died. But what the researchers documented in the days and weeks that followed was different from simple grief. Thomas's behavior changed permanently. He became more vigilant, more reactive to illness in others in his group, more attentive to signs of weakness. The researchers noted that he appeared to be monitoring the health of remaining group members in a way he hadn't before, as if something about Noel's death had updated his model of what could happen. Crows present a different and in some ways even more unsettling dimension of this. In 2015, Kaylee Swift at the University of Washington published research on what she called crow funerals. When a crow dies, nearby crows gather, sometimes dozens of them. They make noise, they mob the area, and then they avoid it. For weeks, sometimes months, crows will detour around the location where a crow died, even after the body is completely gone. Swift spent years investigating why. She found that the gathering wasn't purely social, it wasn't random, and it wasn't just about danger assessment. The crows were learning. They were encoding the location, the context, and potentially the cause of death as information to be avoided. They were treating death as data, something to be studied and remembered, and used to change future behavior. That is not the response of an animal that has no concept of what death means. But here's where the science reaches its limit and the philosophy takes over. All of that, the elephant vigils, the chimpanzee monitoring, the crow funerals, it's behavioral. We can document what animals do in the presence of death. What we cannot do is get inside what they experience. There's a concept philosophers call mortality salience. And in humans, it produces something very specific. Terror management theory, developed by Jeff Greenberg, Sheldon Solomon, and Tom Pazinski in the 1980s, argues that human culture, art, religion, the drive to leave a legacy, to build things that outlast us, is largely a response to the awareness of our own mortality. We know we die. We can't stop thinking about it, and so we build systems of meaning to make that knowledge bearable. The pyramids, the cathedrals, the novels, the children, the Instagram posts, all of it, at some level, a response to knowing the ending. Do animals have anything equivalent? Not in that form. But in 2020, a research team led by Joseph Call at the Max Planck Institute reviewed decades of data on great ape behavior around death and concluded something careful and important. Great apes, they wrote, appear to have a functional understanding of death as a state that is permanent, that involves loss of normal biological function, and that is categorically different from sleep or unconsciousness. They don't just respond to death the way they respond to absence. They respond to it differently, more intensely, more persistently, in ways that suggest they understand something irreversible has occurred. Whether that understanding extends to the self, whether a chimpanzee lying in its nest at night has any equivalent of the human thought that one day this will stop, we genuinely do not know. We may never know. There is one piece of evidence that sits between the behavioral and the philosophical in a way that's almost impossible to categorize cleanly. In captive settings, elderly great apes who are terminally ill sometimes behave in ways their caretakers describe as withdrawal. They become quieter. They disengage from social activity. They stop competing for food and status. Some stop eating. Researchers debate whether this is a symptom of physical decline or something else, something that looks uncomfortably like preparation. One caretaker at a primate sanctuary in South Africa described an elderly female chimpanzee in her final weeks as seeming to be wrapping something up, moving through the group slowly, spending time with specific individuals she had known longest, sitting alone and looking at nothing in particular. The caretaker was careful to say she didn't know what the chimpanzee was experiencing, but she said she had seen humans in hospice do the same thing. Here's what science can say with reasonable confidence right now. Multiple species, including elephants, great apes, corvids, and cetaceans, show behavioral responses to death that go beyond simple startle or avoidance. Some of those responses, particularly in great apes, suggest a functional understanding that death is permanent and biologically total. The neurological architecture for conscious experience, including the structures associated with anticipation and fear, exists in mammals and birds. The capacity for mortality awareness may exist on a spectrum rather than as a binary switch that only flips on in humans. What science cannot say is whether any animal lies awake at night aware that it will die, whether any creature other than humans carries that specific weight. Whether the crow avoiding the place where its companion died is doing so because it understands mortality, or because it has encoded a location as dangerous without any broader conceptual framework around what danger ultimately means. The honest answer is that we don't know. And the fact that we don't know doesn't mean the answer is no. Go back to the elephant in the field in Kenya, standing over bones she didn't recognize, touching them with the tip of her trunk in the dark. We can measure her cortisol. We can track her movement patterns. We can document how long she stays and what she does with her body while she's there. What we cannot do is ask her what she knows. What we cannot do is find out whether somewhere in that vast, ancient, extraordinarily complex brain, there is something that understands that the bones on the ground were once what she is now, and that what she is now will one day be what the bones are. Whether there is something it feels like to be her, standing there, in the dark, with that knowledge, or something close to it, or something we don't yet have a word for. We gave her a study number. We wrote down the time. We went home. She stayed a little longer. Then she walked away, and we still don't know why.